Hello everybody and welcome into my latest live video, and let's roll the titles. Welcome in. Today it is Wednesday, the 23rd of November 2022. I'm CareyHolzman, and today we're going to be doing kind of an overview, light review of a couple of Wi-Fi 6E routers. Based on some suggestions from the chat during some previous live broadcast, the latest ASUS router that I hadn't seen before was brought to my attention. That's the ZenWiFi Pro ET12. That's this box right here. And I was already in the process of wanting to evaluate the latest version of the NETGEAR Nighthawk router that I've been using here in Studio B, which is the current router that I'm using right now is this one. So for the sample, I've got my previous router. I think it's the RAX120. They're basically, what NETGEAR has done is more or less kept the same shell and just redid all the innards. Even the ports on this router where the clips face up. On the new router, on this one, those clips face down. So it's very obviously a different design, but from the outside housing looks very similar. First and foremost, what I want to get out of the way is that this is a mesh router, whereas this is a normal Wi-Fi router. They're both equivalent in nearly every way, including price, except this router is more expandable in the Wi-Fi range area, and this router is more expandable with regards to actually plugging things into it. So given my needs, I need hardline plugs, a lot of Ethernet plugs, and you get one less on this router. I don't know why ASUS did this, and I'm going to just kind of go over this lightly. These were both purchased from Amazon using money that was contributed via Super Chat and from viewers like you. And in order to get the money to go further, I bought these from Amazon warehouse where somebody else had purchased them and returned them for some reason. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with them. I think they were described as potentially having a blemish. I can't find a blemish on them. They work perfectly so far as I can tell and do what they're supposed to do. And it saved between the two routers over $100 versus buying brand new. And because I made sure I was purchasing from Amazon warehouse, I know that I have more than 30 days. I think when you get into the holiday shopping season, Amazon extends that return period, assuming you're giving it as a gift in late December and giving the recipient time after that to return it, like an additional 30 days, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't really do much research on these before I bought them. I don't like to. I know that they're both, I have owned NETGEAR routers and I have owned ASUS routers. There are NETGEAR routers I don't like, and there are NETGEAR routers I love. There are ASUS routers I don't like, and there are ASUS routers that I love. And they both have well over a dozen routers you can pick from if you search on Amazon. Now, in the video notes below this video, there are links to each of these routers, including this older Nighthawk that I've got here, and the ASUS router that I was my favorite for a long time, has 8 1 gigabit LAN ports on the back of it, which was essential for somebody like me where I'm plugging in a lot of things, and I also need the Wi-Fi. A big red alert is anytime you see something advertised as being a mesh router, especially if it looks like a tower. Those generally don't have very many plugs that you can plug in. And while yes, you can always add a network switch, it's just adding to more cabling. It's messy in that sense. You've got another plug you have to plug in. And when something's not working on your network and you want to unplug everything and plug it back in again, you better remember to plug the switch, unplug it and plug it back in too. I've had 2 occasions this year at separate locations where the switch was all but forgotten because it wasn't located next to the router. And it was the problem with the network at both locations. Two completely different switches, two completely different networks. The problems were spaced out by about 4 to 6 weeks. In both cases, I believe the problem happened after a power outage. And when things came back on, the switch was kind of working and kind of not working. Like in one case, customer kept losing internet access randomly. And by unplugging and replugging in their router, they'd get it back. And this would happen once or twice a week. We couldn't find the source to this. But what we weren't resetting or checking was the switch located in a different wiring closet. The other one, after a power outage, everything was downloading fine, but the upload was abysmal. And after resetting the router, not resetting it, but unplugging it, plugging it back in, same with the cable modem, nothing changed. So what I ended up doing was looking around manually, tracing the LAN cables, and realized there was a router, or rather there was a switch on the floor in one of the offices that was used to connect more devices in that one office. I just forgot it was there. Simply by unplugging it, waiting a minute, plugging it back in, problems went away. So as you can imagine, I don't want to add another point of failure to my network. I want to be able to keep it simple. And if I can have more ports available on the router, that I don't have to buy the switch, there's one less thing I got to deal with or diagnose or maintain or replace. And so that's my biggest complaint on the, what is this called again? The ZenWiFi Pro ET12. Now these are both Wi-Fi 6E routers. They're both 12-stream wireless routers. However, this is really designed as a mesh router. If you're somebody who's got to plug a lot of stuff in, plan on buying a switch or just don't buy this router. They're both about the same price, and unless you like the form factor better, what you should also know is in the first quarter of next year, so in January, February, or March, we're going to see routers from all the router manufacturers with the new Wi-Fi 7 standard. So here I am just bumping up to 6E, and within a matter of months, the Wi-Fi 7 standard will be out. And of course, in order to take advantage of that, you'll need Wi-Fi 7 wireless adapters or wireless cards on your computers. Likely, all the new cell phones will have that as standard. For example, I would imagine that the new Samsung Galaxy S23, that traditionally comes out in February, the new models from Samsung, I'm going to guess that's going to have Wi-Fi 7. It's right on the edge. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't looked up what the rumors are. And if you wanted to even use Wi-Fi 6E, you'd have to install an internal card. And it's my understanding you'd need Windows 11. I don't think it runs on Windows 10. However, there are no USB Wi-Fi 6E adapters that I'm aware of. I've seen NETGEAR promote one, but I don't think it's been released yet. So I can't even really take advantage of the Wi-Fi 6E myself, but I certainly can take advantage of having tri-band, 3 bands, and the greater power that these routers have with regards to range. So right now, this ASUS router is probably my least favorite and will likely get returned back to Amazon. Nothing wrong with it, it just doesn't meet my specific demands. Might meet yours, it absolutely doesn't meet mine. The new NETGEAR Nighthawk router that I purchased, the RAXE500, the USB external drive that I hooked to it and use it as like a server storage, it's running at about 40 megabytes per second on the wireless data transfer. And on the old router, it ran at 80. So this is supposed to be more powerful, but my data transfers back and forth to the USB drive are slower. Now, it doesn't make a huge difference in time. If a file took a minute to copy, that would be a pretty big file. Then it's going to take me about 2 minutes to copy now. Of course, I don't sit around and wait for it to copy. I continue doing other work, but I expected it to be better. About the maximum megabyte per second data transfer rate to a USB mechanical hard drive is probably, well, I can tell you over my network at Studio A to a Synology NAS, wired, it runs about 129 megabytes per second. So a little disappointed with both routers, if I'm honest. Not much innovation being offered in the new NETGEAR Nighthawk, and too many limitations for this price point on the ASUS ZenWiFi Pro ET12. I am excited, however, with some Wi-Fi 7 announcements that were recently made by the folks over at TP-Link. And I just want to show you the TP-Link website because the router looks amazing. Let me see if I can pull that up here and share this screen with you. Bear with me for just a moment. I'll tell you what, first, well, no, let's look at Wi-Fi 7 and we'll share the screen. That should work. Okay, so I'm at TP-Link's website. Again, there's a link for this in the video notes below the video. And they're describing what Wi-Fi 7 offers that's different from Wi-Fi 6 and 6E. As you can see, these standards of AC, AX, and BE are confusing to the consumer. That's why we're calling them 6 and 7 now. But they still have the old names too. We can scroll through here and we can see that they're claiming Wi-Fi 7 is going to be 4.8 times faster, 100 times lower latency, 5 times the network capacity, so the number of items you can connect to it. You can see how quickly Wi-Fi is adapting and growing and evolving if you haven't been paying attention. Wi-Fi 5 was introduced in 2013, 6 in 2019, 6E just last year, and Wi-Fi 7 expected to be first quarter of next year. So you can go through all of the information here if you're interested in it, but take a look at how sexy this router is. The Archer BE550 and the BE900 I'm very interested in. Now this is about a $700 MSRP router. This one I don't know much about. The BE19000 looks like an Imperial command ship from Star Wars. When they land, they fold their wings up. That's really neat. It almost looks like somebody was inspired by Star Wars and the NETGEAR router that I have in front of me and just kind of made it a little smaller, a little less wide and a little taller, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I'm guessing it's this, sorry, this one here I think is the $700 router. So we're looking at, instead of 11,000, we're looking at 19,000. And then this one at 9,300 will be a bit slower. And 24,000, actually 24,000, this must be the $700 router because that's got the biggest numbers. Anyway, they look really attractive. And instead of tri-band now we've got quad band. And if these numbers actually display on the front, oh, that would be very useful for me, especially when I'm live streaming and I need to maintain an eye on my connection at all times. So I'm super excited for these TP-Link routers, but I'm sure NETGEAR and ASUS, among other router manufacturers, have their designs in the works right now, if not even in factories being built for release. I'll be excited to check those out, and far more excited, I'm sure, than what is more of the same with this current router overview I'm doing today. So let me go back to camera 1 as soon as I find it. There I am. All right. And I'm going to just pop over to the chat room here, say hello to everybody. Thanks for joining us, of course. And hello to Craig Lilly, who just became a member to our tech club here for 6 months. Right on. Thank you. Craig says, hello, Carey, and everyone in the chat. Welcome in. Welcome in. I want to give you a close-up view of the ASUS router first. Now, clearly, I've unboxed these. I've updated their firmware. I've gone through the setup. It's the same as the video I just made a couple days ago. pretty much the same interface from ASUS and the same interface from NETGEAR that I demonstrated in my video from earlier. Just, was it earlier this week or late last week? I can't remember anymore. So much is going on. And what I want to do for me is, let me see myself full screen. Now I can see. Okay, I'm going to bring the ASUS router up to you first because it's a bit unusual in a couple of different ways. First of all, most mesh systems will come with 2 or 3 towers like this, or totems, and they very rarely have more than 2 plugs on the back of them, LAN plugs. And usually one is sort of a master, and then the others would be satellites. What ASUS has done here is different, but I don't think it's necessarily better. This is a full functioning router. And if you were to get the 2-pack of these mesh routers, you're just getting the same exact router twice. It's just discounted when you're buying 2 of them. One is not a satellite. They are both independent routers. And the idea behind having tri-band is that you can have your 2.4 and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi streams, and then use your you can preferably connect the 2 routers together with a cable. That's how we call the backhaul. Or the routers need to use one of the bands, whether that's the 2.4 or the 5 or the 6. It becomes unavailable to you, one of the bands. So if it's only a 2-band router, you lose one of the bands so that the routers can talk to each other wirelessly. So it's always better if you can run a wire from one router to the other. If you're getting a mesh system that comes with, 2 or 3 of these little totems, those will always, well, they won't always be, but they're intended to always do their backhaul wirelessly. Although I think you can still cable them up. As you can see, at this price point, I'm disappointed at how limited the number of Ethernet jacks are that we have back there. You'll see one's labeled LAN 1, LAN 2. There's a 2.5 gig, that's your WAN, your wide area network. That's where your cable modem plugs in. And then there's a 2.5 gig intended for your LAN. Now, I don't have anything running at 2.5, and I don't have fiber, so running at 10 gig, I wish. It's great to know if you do have fiber and you want to take advantage of that. And there are routers available for you, and of course you're going to pay dearly for them, but hopefully you only have to buy them once every 4 to 6 years. Also on the back, we've got our barrel connector for power. We've got a physical on-off switch that I don't much care for. It's better than the push-on, push-off that ASUS was using. I've had those switches, they stop sticking in, and then you have a perfectly functioning router that you have to hold the button in manually to keep it on. And I ended up having to open up one of my older ASUS routers when the switch just wouldn't stay in anymore, and I just had to get my soldering iron and permanently put it in an always-on position. So to turn it off, I pull the cable, power cable. Here's a reset button, and then a WPS button. Why we're still using WPS, I don't understand. The idea is that if you have a Wi-Fi device that has a WPS button and your router has a WPS button, it's like programming a garage door opener remote. You push the button, WPS button on your router, and then within a matter of 30 or 50 seconds, whatever it is, there's a timeout period. But within that window of opportunity, you go push the WPS button on your printer or other wireless device that you want to connect without having to input the SSID and the password, and they connect. But it's also an easy way that hackers can use to break into your Wi-Fi network, assuming they're within range of your Wi-Fi broadcast. Up at the top, it's a little funky looking. Those, I guess, are these angled things are the antennas. The centerpiece lights up, and you can tell the status of the router by the color of the top. But TP-Link's been doing this for a while, so nothing innovative necessarily there. And it's very large for a mesh router. It's physically large, it's heavy, and it's extremely limited. I'm just upset that I don't have, the standard is having 5, 1 for the LAN and 4 for your LAN. Unless it's a mesh system. If it's a mesh system, as I mentioned, you may only get 2. 1 is the main router and the other 2 depend on that main router. You can't use the other 2 independently. With ASUS, they've just kind of done a lazy and expensive thing by saying, here, we'll just put, we'll sell this in a package of 2, and we'll sell it individually as 1. But you're getting the same router twice with all the DHCP and functionality, which gets disabled effectively when you use it as a mesh system. So this whole thing seems pointless to me, and this is likely going back. Very disappointed in it. Now, with regards to the Nighthawk, it's more or less the same as the previous Nighthawk I was using. This one has a flat black, which still shows fingerprints, as you can see. The new one is now glossy black. I don't know why NETGEAR did that. This one, I wondered if the fan ever, there's a little fan there. I could never determine if that fan ever worked. And there was a command you could run to manually kick that fan on. I found it on Reddit. And then you reboot the router, and then the fan just runs all the time. And it verified that, yeah, the fan runs. And when it runs, it's so quiet you don't even hear it. But I've never once seen that fan kick on. Once I verified that the fan did work, I just issued the opposite command to put it back in auto mode. The new Wi-Fi 6E version of this router, the fan's pretty loud at startup, and then it quiets down. So at least I know the fan works. And apart from when it boots up, the newer version of this does seem to boot up faster. As I mentioned, the connectors on the back, we have a bunch more connectors here, much more generous. We have 2 USB 3 ports. There's that push on and push off connector, which I'm not a fan of that. I'd prefer a toggle, not a slide up and down or a slide left and right, but rather a rocker switch. That's my preference. Haven't had any problems with this yet, but if you're someone that's always turning it on and turning it off for solving problems, it'll probably break for you sooner than it breaks for other people. It is just a moving part that is prone to failure over time. I didn't cover the USB ports, did I? Does this have any USB ports? I thought it did. Oh, another reason to return this. I don't see any ability to plug in a drive to use as shared storage on a network. I don't see the ability to plug a printer in. Yeah, I just realized that. And they're both about the same exact price. Both this router and this router are about $450, I want to say. So you're looking at a lot of money for a router. My personal limit using a router for business is $500. I won't spend more than that. Whether or not I would bite the bullet to try Wi-Fi 7 first, I won't have anything Wi-Fi 7 to connect to it. I just recently ordered a Wi-Fi 6E M.2 adapter, Wi-Fi adapter, and I'm going to crack open my Dell XPS and upgrade it from AX200 to AX210 Intel, and we'll see if I have any improvement with my file transfer speeds. So those are your 2 routers close up. When you get the NETGEAR Nighthawk router, these fins, they just pull up and fold down. So that's how it ships to you. So there's no damage in shipping. The antennas are in these fins, so you just lift it up and push down. You plug in your power, you plug in your cable modem, you plug in anything you need for your LAN, you turn it on, you're good to go. Obviously, you're going to need a lot more room on your desk for this one than you will for this one. But this one has much more expandability, hardwired. They're both going to perform pretty similarly with range. The problem when we talk about range is you can watch YouTube videos and reviews talking about what distance or range that content creator was able to get. But it's going to be of very little use for most of you, because depending on what your building is made out of, how far you want that or need that signal to go, how crowded the network space is where you are. If you're living in an apartment or you're living in a regular suburban neighborhood, you likely have when you're looking at your Wi-Fi connections available to you, you likely see, in most neighborhoods around Phoenix, more than 10. And ideally, you want to be on a different channel from all of your neighbors. Now, NETGEAR has an app you can put on your phone, as does ASUS. And what NETGEAR's app will do is show you what channel all those other SSIDs are around you, and then recommend what channels you should be using that aren't as crowded or don't have anybody using them. It's a wonderful addition to the NETGEAR Nighthawk app, and it means you don't have to download any special Wi-Fi analyzer tools or be techie to interpret it. It just tells you these are your best channels. You go into your router, you set your channels. And of course, as people upgrade in your neighborhood, they don't necessarily tell you they do it. You should probably check that once every 6 months or once every year to see if any of your neighbors are now on the channels you were using, so then you can find less used or completely empty channels for a cleaner signal. Now, if you live out somewhere where you're on an acre or 2 acres of land, and you're still close enough to the city that you're getting DSL or cable internet, likely your Wi-Fi signal is going to be a lot cleaner. You're going to get better range, you're going to get better speed, assuming, see, there's another caveat, what you're connecting to your router. So if you're connecting an older laptop or an older cell phone, you won't see much benefit from necessarily the range or the performance of a newer router without also upgrading the network card of the devices you're connecting. So things like your Nest thermostat or your Ring doorbells, there's not going to be any likely noticeable improvement in performance. You might get some better range, however. I will say that it is entirely possible, quite likely, quite frankly, if you have an older Wi-Fi router, say more than 4 years old, and all you do is upgrade to one of these Wi-Fi 6E routers by literally any manufacturer, you might find your range is significantly improved. But then again, you might not, because of the environment you're in, which includes the materials the building is made out of, the distance you need to go, the device you're trying to connect to has its own limitations, and how crowded the airspace is with regards to, well, the bandwidth, what I'm calling airspace, of how many other people have Wi-Fi around you. It can get crowded. And well, it'll work. You can operate your router on the same channel as a neighbor. It's just not going to perform as well because it's fighting the signals. So when you're watching Wi-Fi router reviews or reading about them online, bear in mind you're not likely going to get the same results that the content creator received. And furthermore, the best results you're going to get are likely what the advertiser or what the manufacturer is advertising on the product page. They're saying, this router can cover 3,000 square feet. Okay, it's not likely going to cover more than that. So for a content creator to suggest that they were able to go 3,500 square feet, in all likelihood, the manufacturer also said that. So you're not really going to get any more useful information to performance or range from a review than what the manufacturer is already going to highlight on their product page. If that makes sense to you, it's just so many variables at play here that what one person experiences is unlikely going to mimic your own experience. And for that reason, you just make your best decision by looking at independent reviews that other buyers have left from, on Amazon or Newegg or B&H Photo or wherever it is you're buying your components. And of course, make sure when you're buying, you buy from a retailer that is easy on returns. So I know from my experience, Amazon has been fantastic with returns. And I don't hesitate when I buy returned product as long as it's coming from Amazon warehouse. So with that, let me go back over to the chat and see what you guys are discussing. And if you have any questions for me, please let me know. And thanks for whoever that was that mentioned this router. Until you guys showed it, or mentioned it rather, I looked it up. I missed the release on this. I never saw any press release or anything. So I had no idea this router was out, nor did I have any idea how limited it was. I've seen I've seen a couple of reviews on it, and I felt like the reviewers were just glowing over it based on its aesthetic. And for me, the aesthetic's not as important as my ability to plug things into it. So this is severely crippling my ability to have what I need plugged in for what what my expectations are. And if this was around $300, it would make sense. But at around $450, I think it's well overpriced. Let me take a look over at the Amazon page here and show you what I'm talking about. Let me go back over to my screen capture. Okay, so I've left a couple tabs open. We're going to start up here on the left. So this is the router. It's at $480. What I'll do is I'll scroll down to the right, and you'll see it says saved with used, and then there's a condition like new, good, acceptable. And if I click on that, or right here, new and used from $360, that's a heck of a savings. However, if we look through here, this is coming from Amazon Warehouse. Good. Amazon Warehouse, Amazon Warehouse, Amazon. Look at how many of these have been returned. And of course, depending on the condition, some of them may have everything in the box, like it was never even taken out of the box. And that's why the price is not discounted very much. And then when you're looking at third-party sellers, one of the first things you'll know as a third-party seller is the price. This is way too much money. And this is also way too much money in my opinion. And you're also not going to get necessarily Amazon's return policy. These sellers may choose to not accept returns or to charge restocking fees. So I would avoid purchasing unless it's coming from Amazon Warehouse. But look at how much you can save. At $360, it says it's in acceptable condition. That likely means it might be missing manuals, it may be missing the original box, it might have a scuff or two. But it won't be cracked or anything like that. And you can always check it out yourself, and if there's anything about it you don't like for any reason, you just send it back over to Amazon and get your money back. Get a credit put back on your account, or have the money returned the way you paid for it. So there's the 2-pack listed here. And you'll see that's $840. And then if we scroll down, used and new, there's some discounts there as well. But all you're getting are 2 of the same router. And if I had to look closely before I did my shopping, I would have noticed the picture of the back of the router. And if I read the details, it's not like ASUS was hiding anything here. I'm just surprised because I assumed it would just be there at a router at this price point. And you'll see they have a Wi-Fi 6E version of the router and just a plain old Wi-Fi 6 version, both available in 1-pack and 2-packs. And the regular Wi-Fi 6 version at $399 versus the 6E version at $479. It's about an $80 price difference from ASUS on that. Next tab over, this is the router I am using right now, broadcasting this stream to you from, the NETGEAR Nighthawk 12 Stream Wi-Fi 6E router. You notice it says coverage up to 3,500 square feet and 60 devices. And if we go back over to the ASUS product page, it says up to 3,000 square feet. And I'll see where it tells us how many devices. But the routers are essentially identical in performance and range. If anything, the NETGEAR router is $30 less, gives you 500 more potential square feet of coverage, and you also get the USB ports, 2 of them, and more LAN ports. So I don't know what ASUS is thinking on the pricing structure. See here, used, new and used, available. And if we bring that up, Amazon Warehouse, good. Third party. I think the rest of these are third party. Even if they're shipping from Amazon, it's who they're sold by, because who they're sold by can determine whether or not returns are accepted. So if you're going to buy something that's been returned, you absolutely want to have peace of mind that you will be able to return it at no expense and without any hassles. You know, you don't want any restocking fees. And so you could save money and get more with the NETGEAR router compared to this ASUS router. But, you know, you could ideally buy 2 of these and put them in a mesh configuration no differently than ASUS. So that's why I say the NETGEAR one, the NETGEAR router is far more expandable and right out of the box offers you much more for less money. So what else do I have open here? This was a router that I had a few years ago back at Studio A, and I loved this router. I think I paid $400 or $450 back in the day. Now you can see it's $225. I don't see any used. Oh yeah, no good deals here. This area can change daily. Why I like this router so much was because of the number of jacks on the back of it. 8 1 gigabit LAN jacks, negating. I used to have a small 5-port switch. I was able to get rid of the 5-port switch next to my router and replace my old router and my 5-port switch with just this one router, and it had the USB port on the back. So I wish that the ASUS would continue offering product like this so that it covers both the Wi-Fi expandability and the ability to hardwire things. It seems ASUS is moving further and further away from any more than 4 jacks on the back of their routers, which is disappointing for a guy like me. And TP-Link is still doing it. TP-Link has routers now currently available that have 8 1 gigabit LAN ports on the back. Some people are wanting 2.5 or 10 gigabit ports if you've got fiber. I don't use 2.5. I don't have anything where that would benefit me. And I don't have fiber, so the 10 gig obviously wouldn't benefit me either. And those are very expensive to get the 10 gig routers. And then we looked at that already. So this router, interestingly enough, is also a 12-stream router. This is the AX6000. And this is what I was using in Studio B, right here in Studio B for the last, what's it been, 2 years? And this also covers pretty much the same range, 3,500 square feet. And if you look at the back of it, you'll see that the clips on the jacks face up. And if you look at the back of the new one, do they have a picture of the back? Well, they're reversed. Everything's flipped the other way for some reason on the new one. But anyway, look at the price difference. At $268 new, I don't know what they have under new and used, at $174.99. Anything from Amazon's warehouse? No. Yes, that one at $182 is an acceptable condition. Yeah, don't worry about where it ships from. You want to see who it's sold by. And we want to look for Amazon warehouse when we're buying returned product for peace of mind, to avoid restocking fees or return hassles. Otherwise, it's not worth the risk. So going from $268.99, and our option at Amazon is $183, let's say, that's a good, was that a $90 price difference? Could be worth the price savings. And I've got to tell you, the difference in price from going from $268 for a brand new 12-stream router, it's just not Wi-Fi 6E, it's just regular Wi-Fi 6, covers the same amount of square footage, but it's support for 30 devices. And as you can see, the newer one has support for 60 devices. So your combined speeds, it also offers the third band at 10.8 gigabits per second versus our combined speed of up to 6 gigabits per second. So the newer version is supporting twice as many devices at nearly, but not quite, twice the speed. And you know what, at $268, for what you're getting here, I think that's a solid value. This has been a good router for me. I've really enjoyed it. I got really no complaints about it. And like I said, my throughput to my external storage device connected to USB was better than it currently is. So both of these routers may be going back to Amazon, even though there's nothing wrong with them. So if you're wondering why would you buy return product, because there are people like me who get it and the end result is the same or less than what they were trying to improve upon, or the result is just meh, not worth it, we send it back. Knowing that Wi-Fi 7 is coming out early next year, I think I'd rather have the $900 back or $800 back I spent for these two routers and apply that $800 to one good Wi-Fi 7 router to get my hands on it early and see if that makes any difference. Again, not having anything Wi-Fi 7 on the connection side yet, but at the same time, I don't have anything that's Wi-Fi 6E on the connection side. Maybe my Galaxy S22? I don't know, I'd have to look into that, but it's not like that's really important to me on my phone. So these are all things for you to consider if you're in the market to upgrade your router to get more range, more performance, and always know that the range and performance you get will be unique to the connections you're making in the environment that you're in. All right, now, where was I? I was going back to the chat room to see if there were any questions and I got distracted. So I'm gonna scroll all the way up and see what I've missed here. Hello to all my friends in blue, welcome in. Good to see everybody. Thanks for joining me on this Wednesday in the middle of the week. I guess it's really the end of the week, isn't it? Here in America, we have a short work week with tomorrow being Thanksgiving. Friday will be Black Friday. Lots of deals going on in and around tech. A lot of Amazon's own products. There are Fire TV and Kindles, all the traditionally all go on sale for like 50 to 70% off every Black Friday and Cyber Monday. I'm going to just look through the chat here and see if I've missed any questions. There's Mats Olof joining us from Sweden. Hey, Mats Olof, good to see you, my friend. Jack asks, what is the difference between a mesh system and a Mocha system? I've never heard of a Mocha system, but you know what I'll do? And I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type that in. Mesh versus Mocha. Is Mocha a thing or is that a question? Or like a joke? Working with Mocha Pro's Power Mesh. So Mocha is a manufacturer? Is that what they are? I don't know. I guess that's a question the chat room hopefully will have an answer for. No idea. Reaper Hack says, I'm loving these router reviews. Yeah, so here's the thing. Some people, they just want to know, is it good or bad? Or they're expecting a tutorial on how to utilize all the functions of the router, like an instructional video. I want to give you sort of an overview and set your expectations with everything regarding price. Physical size of the routers can be difficult to determine from a product page until you have something to compare it to. You get an idea of how big it is. Some of these really expensive routers take up a very large footprint and you need to have space for them. And you know, I remember the first time I got one of these big routers, I think it was that ASUS router with the 8 ports. I was just shocked at how big the box was. I was like, holy cow, I had no idea. It was like 3 times larger than my ASUS wireless N router that I had forever, by the way. That's the one that had the broken push-on, push-off switch on the back that I hardwired. I still have that sitting on a shelf at Studio A as an emergency backup, sort of a test router. If I ever think I might have a router issue with a customer, I just throw it in the trunk of the car. It has no value to me, and it's just great to use as a test. And it's good to use as a loaner if, in fact, it solves the problem for the customer. I leave that one there, and then the customer and I work out getting them a new router. And until the new router arrives and can be hooked up, I just let them hold on to the old router that I've used so they can get by until the replacement or upgrade comes in. And then I'll take it back and it goes back up on the shelf, and welcome to the life of being a computer tag. Sarge Tech says he just upgraded his router's firmware and now his connection is faster. All right, right on. If you have your own router, one that your internet service provider isn't provided you, you should check for firmware updates. They generally do not happen automatically, and you'll need to log into your router and go to the administrative section and check for firmware. And if you haven't done that in over a year, there are likely very important security and other feature enhancements that would benefit you to do that. It'll cost you nothing. The router does have to be restarted when you do the firmware update, so make sure anybody in the building knows that you're about to do that, because they're going to get kicked off, and it'll likely take a good 5 minutes before the firmware update is installed and the router has rebooted itself and come back online. I'd even say up to 10 minutes, depending on the router. These bigger routers, their firmware is fairly sizable, and their boot time takes longer than the simple routers. Lou Greenia says he's got the Nighthawk RAXE500 and he's got no complaints so far. What is the RAXE500? Let's take a look at that one. Let's go to Amazon. NETGEAR RAXE500. That's the 70. I don't see a 75. But it looks like it's one of these batwing routers. Coverage up to 2,300 square feet, 2,500 square feet, up to 40 devices. Yeah, that looks like a good router. Wait, that's the RAX70. And that's a tri-band router. I don't know what a 75 is. ASUS also has this other router I'm intrigued by. Oops, let me go back up here. ASUS Wi-Fi gaming router. And I can't remember what it's called, but I'll know it when I see. Here it is. So ASUS has this other router, which may actually be better for me. They promote this for gamers, but of course you don't have to be a gamer to appreciate it. It's got a quad-core 2 gigahertz CPU. The game acceleration I don't care about. It is mesh compatible. And if we look through the pictures of it, you see what connections we've got on the back. Doesn't show us the back. Come on now. They also, and you'll see this is less money than this other ASUS router I've got in front of me. At $372.99, Amazon Warehouse. Could save about what, 70 bucks? That one's from Amazon Warehouse. And it doesn't look like any of the other ones are. So at least that's a safe one that I could try. And they have a different color right here. And they charge more for this one, I guess just because of the color scheme, and I think the antennas light up. Do we have any pictures of the back of this one? Now you see that's $450. And on the back we've got two USB, a USB 3, a USB 2. There's our 4 LAN ports standard, and dual 2.5 gig WAN and LAN, and power. Pretty straightforward. That seems more in line with what would meet my expectations. I don't necessarily need to spend that kind of money if that's the same router apart from light up antennas, if that's what the price differential is about. What about used and new? Anything available used and new? No. No. These are third-party sellers, you can tell from the price. So the other one, if I can go back, there we go. Much more affordable without the silliness and the bizarre paint job. Oh, these might light up anyway. These might just light up in red. I think everything else is the same. Dual 2.5 quad core 2 gigahertz. Yeah, I think it's the same except for the paint job. And significantly less money. And that's bigger than it looks, folks. That's why I say, unless you see it in front of you, you'd think that was a much smaller router than what it is in person. So maybe I send these two back and get that one instead. I don't know. Decisions. What do you think? Let me go back to camera one. And I also want to go back to the chat room and see what you guys are talking about. Reaper says these third-party sellers are crazy to think people would pay that. No, they're not, because people do pay that. They can list any price they want and just keep it up there for, you know, a year or 2 years. All they have is they only need to sell it once to make it worthwhile. Doman 2000 says, with prices so extreme, you should examine every detail before buying. Nah, you don't have to. That's the beauty of Amazon. You slap it on a credit card. You make sure you're getting it from Amazon or Amazon warehouse. You have typically 30 days to evaluate it and send it back if you don't like it. I don't see any point in going through the examining every detail, because even if it meets all of your requirements as far as connections go, it doesn't mean it's going to work well in your environment. As I have already mentioned, you can't study your way out of failure. You know, failure is not a good word. Out of experience. You cannot replace book smarts with street smarts. So the book smarts is the theory, and the street smarts is the experience. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there's no harm if you want to take your time and look through all the details. But that doesn't guarantee you're going to have a good experience with the product, or that the product is going to work well for you for a number of reasons. And nothing replaces experience. So while you can study it all day, it doesn't change what your experience is going to be. So for me personally, I don't want to spend all day studying things when I've got work to do. I'll just order it, make sure I can return it if I don't like it. Returning to Amazon is super easy. I just put the items back in the box. I take that box without packaging it. I just take it over to the UPS store. They scan it. It's done. Doesn't cost me a penny. Just takes a few minutes of time. Amazon makes it completely painless. Greg wants to know if NETGEAR still offers only 30-day setup support. I don't know. I haven't contacted support for a router or a networking product in years. I don't know why you would. Every answer you should need, you should be able to find online. And if the product is that difficult for you to get working, send it back. Buy a different product. Choose a different manufacturer. I can't imagine what sort of setup problem would require a call to tech support. Can you give me an example of a problem you've had in the past where you had to call the product support to get the problem sorted? And did they sort it? Because a lot of times people that call support regret it. They just end up either making a problem worse, or they can't understand the person on the other end of the phone, or the person on the other end of the phone just doesn't have anything useful for them to help solve their problem. When you're connecting wireless devices, in particular, manufacturers, when it comes to support, will typically blame the other manufacturer. So in other words, if you have a Dell computer and you're trying to connect it to your NETGEAR router that you just bought and it won't connect via Wi-Fi, and you call NETGEAR, they're going to say that's a Dell problem. You call Dell, they're going to say it's a NETGEAR problem. So unless you buy all the products from the same company, quite often they just want you off the phone as quickly as they can. They don't care if you're, as far as they're concerned, the problem is with the other manufacturer. And then of course the other manufacturer will tell you the same thing. So I don't know why anybody would care about support these days. But I would be interested in what your past experiences that lead you to have this anxiety or concern. William Lynn says his Eero mesh system says 75 plus devices with up to 128. Yeah, and there is a little asterisk next to how many devices. When they say 30 or 60, I think they're referring to how many devices can communicate simultaneously. When you go beyond those numbers, it starts juggling between them. So I think you can have, the technical side of it, I think, is 128 on these routers. But that if you want a smooth experience where each device doesn't have to wait its turn, that each one is dedicated, I believe that's what they're defining when they say 30 devices, 40 devices, 60 devices. It's not that that's the limit you can have. That's the limit you can have and maintain this performance level. After that, your performance will degrade accordingly. And again, that's my understanding of it. I could be wrong. And if I am, well, feel free to send me a link from a manufacturer that explains that differently than I just did. Hey, Madi Yoel joins us in the chat. Welcome in, Madi. Terrell Cockrum says my Galaxy S21 does Wi-Fi 6E. All right, so I guess my S22 probably has 6E, but again, I don't know why that would benefit me, but where I need it is on a laptop and desktop where I'm transferring files. William Dawson in the chat says, I found that there is no great need to jump to Wi-Fi 6E for a lot of people. Agreed, William. It's nice to have, he continues, but unless you have devices that can use it, it doesn't benefit you. Well, that's true, but the idea is that you're future-proofing, right? That you're preparing to have other devices. But if you're somebody who doesn't throw stuff away and you still have a lot of old Wi-Fi devices laying around, in one way, that could be slowing down your whole Wi-Fi network, where a more advanced router won't slow down everybody else because of that one Wi-Fi connection. But it depends how old your Wi-Fi router is, and of course it depends how old the things you're connecting to it are. Some people always like to have the latest and greatest of everything. And so for that reason, NETGEAR, ASUS, and other manufacturers make a variety of products. And that's why people go, well, which one's best? It's like, well, what are your needs and what is your budget? And what's going to work well in your environment? What's best for one person is absolutely trash for somebody else. Corey in the chat says, Mocha is a device that turns your cable coming from the wall to an entry terminating with an Ethernet port. MOCA. Oh, so it's just power line networking. Yeah, well, that's going to be very slow. But if you can't run a cable, it's better than nothing. You'd be better backhauling on these high-end routers. Going through power line is going to be slower. More secure, at least as far as the backhaul goes, but it's still Wi-Fi at each end anyway, so I'm not quite sure that's going to make much difference. Check out the XR450 from NETGEAR, says Reaper. I have an XR500 at Studio A, and I'm very happy with it. That's got 6 1 gigabit LAN ports on the back. So it's a nice compromise between 4 and 8. And I got no complaints. That router's fantastic. Greg said he had a NETGEAR Nighthawk router at a client and 2 of its ports died 2 months out of warranty. That's very unusual, Greg. Normally when ports die, it's because somebody plugged something into them that they shouldn't have. There's usually a reason why the ports die. It's not typically random. I had a client once, and this was a long time ago, but they had might have been a hub back when we used to use hubs. And the hub was flaky. It was really bizarre the way speeds would go up and down, transmissions would fail intermittently. When we got to the hub and physically inspected it, it was covered in ants, inside and out. On the outside, you might see a couple ants walking around. You're like, so what? You crack that thing open and just hundreds, if not thousands of ants were inside of it. And so that was why the device failed. And it's hard to say, it's hard to do forensics and going back and identifying what causes these failures. But the warranties exist because nobody fixes anything anymore. What they do is, say NETGEAR or ASUS, these companies don't make these routers. They design them, they engineer them, and then they hire a factory, typically in China, to manufacture a certain amount of them at a certain price per unit. And they order a certain percentage of extras to have during the warranty period, so that when you send yours back and it's bad, they just send you a new one. And when the manufacturing of that product stops, then whatever they have left over is what they have. So a lot of times warranties will say, we will send you the same product in return for warranty, or an equivalent product if your product's not available. So in case there were a lot of, an unusual amount of returns that they ran out, and they're not gonna hire the factory to just make a few. It's too expensive, so they'll just send you the newer version of it, right? So the same or equivalent to what you had. Rather, the equivalent or better to what you had. That's pretty much boilerplate warranty. So it may be, depending on when you bought the router, that they wouldn't have had a spare one to give you anyway. On the other hand, if your router was purchased with a credit card, check with your credit card company. I think Visa and MasterCard double your warranty on electronics purchases, and you have to contact your credit card company. So you wouldn't even deal with the manufacturer. But that's very unusual. And I don't think support would have helped you regardless. Because quite frankly, if 2 of these ports die back here, there's nothing anybody on the phone can say to me to make them work again. And if you're out of warranty, they're not going to give you the RMA, and they don't have the power to make exceptions. So this need for support, I can't see how that would have changed anything for you. I can tell you that having ports die on a router is very, very unusual unless something happened and you just don't know that it happened. I had ports on a router die because of a lightning strike. And the lightning didn't hit the building, but it hit right next to the building. And my guess is it was a big electromagnetic pulse, and it just fried not only the router, it fried every network card. And I even had, and I can't explain it, I had to replace one cable that was in the wall. That cable would never get anything better than 100 megabit per second connection. And it physically looked perfect. I didn't see anything wrong with it. And prior to the lightning strike, it was getting gigabit. And it just wouldn't go gigabit anymore. And so I ended up basically running the exact same cables from the same spool, ran it again. It was fine ever since. But if you're not around to see the lightning strike, nobody can tell you that it happened. There's no evidence of it. It's not like it struck the building or left burn marks anywhere. So typically there's a reason why it happens. It's not usually, that's not a normal occurrence. It's very unusual. You'd be very unlikely to ever experience that again, especially on a newer router. Greg says it was a known issue with that model. The problem is what router, tell me what model it was. So here's what happens. So the internet's like an echo chamber. If you want to say vaccinations are dangerous, you can find links that will tell you what you want to hear. I'm not aware of, so people will say that. People will experience a problem that's very unusual. And they'll go online, and sure enough, they'll find a handful of other people that experienced a similar problem. And then they just associate in their brain with that little tiny bit of anecdotal evidence that that is a known problem, when in fact it isn't. And in fact, it affected so few people that there were actual other problems that were much more known, but you weren't looking for those, and therefore you didn't see them. People have a tendency to find specifically what they're looking for and to ignore anything else that doesn't meet their agenda. So I would be very curious as a computer technician, what make and model of router you have, and verify if in fact the manufacturer acknowledged a known problem, or if you're just associating some people that were ticked off all gathering in one location, giving you the impression that that was a lot of people, when in fact it really wasn't a lot of people when you consider how many routers of that model were sold. They might have sold 500,000 of those routers, and if 10,000 people had a problem, that's really not a big deal. It would be unusual for that many people, but it wouldn't necessarily be, it's a bad example because 10,000 is a lot, but overall over 500,000, maybe not. It depends what the failure is. And if the company doesn't acknowledge it, then you're just coming to a conclusion because you read something online with some other like-minded individuals who feel the same way you do. That's nothing that would stand up in a court of law. That's just hearsay. So I sound very skeptical because I have no idea what you're talking about. And I don't know what model or what make or how many years ago this was. Michael says, Carey, I'm thinking about getting my parents the ASUS ZenWiFi system for their home. It's a fairly large house and they're dealing with an ISP router now. My birthday was yesterday. Well, first of all, Michael, happy birthday. Happy belated birthday. I think you could do much better than this, personally, for less money. TP-Link has some nice mesh systems. The Eero, E-E-R-O, is a great mesh system. And there's nothing wrong with this mesh system except its price. I'm sure you can get better coverage for half the price from a different manufacturer, or at least a different model than this. Because this is not a good idea for a mesh system if you have to keep buying expensive routers to add another mesh point versus just buying the satellite. Satellites are very inexpensive. You can pick those up for a fraction of the cost of the main unit. So this is to me, it's just a very dumb way to do it. It's just throwing money at something that you could spend half as much and get so much more from a different offering if that's what you're trying to do. I've used TP-Link, I've used Eero, and NETGEAR. NETGEAR has an amazing system. They have a number of mesh systems that are incredible that aren't as expensive as this. And I would look into those and read those reviews on Amazon or Newegg, wherever you're buying, and then look at YouTube reviews as well, just to get an idea of size and any particular issues that that content creator might have an issue with. Doesn't mean it's going to affect you, right? I have several issues with this, but they may not affect you at all. Reaper says Eero extenders are $100 USD. Yeah, it's nothing. $100, and each extender covers at least, I want to say at least 1,300 square feet. Terrell says he's got the old NETGEAR Orbi system and he loves it. Yeah, I haven't used an Orbi system, but I've heard nothing but good things about them. And I already like NETGEAR routers, and I like ASUS routers. I just don't like them all. So I have no doubt that NETGEAR's mesh system is good and probably a better value. Hey, there's our buddy Mitch Morrison in the chat with the joke of the day. Who is the spiciest singer? Celine Dion. Where would we be without the Mitch Morrison joke of the day? Thank you, Mitch. Matty UL with a $4 super chat contribution. Thank you, Matty. Michael says he's thinking about getting the model below this. It's $350 for a 2-pack. I think that's several models below this. Either way, look, I'm sure it's a fine system. ASUS does make good routers. I just don't like the limitations of it. But absolutely, pick what works for you. I would advise that, until you put it in place and see how it works in your environment, and if it meets your expectations, be sure you're buying from a retailer that will allow you to return it if you want to, without any penalties or having to pay for return shipping. And then feel free to pick whatever you choose, whatever meets your expectations, requirements, and then put it into play and see if it still does. And then when you do, let us know what ends up happening. Be curious what your experience is. Mark Gaines in the chat says the TP-Link Deco is pretty good. Agreed. I have used the TP-Link Deco. I'm very happy with it. It's definitely not the best mesh system out there, but it's one of the most aggressively priced, very easy to set up, very reliable, and for most people, the range is more than they need. XRod666 says, Carey, you missed my contribution. Uh-oh. There it is. $5 comes in from XRod666 via Super Chat. He says, hey, Carey, I hope things are good. Nice to see your stream so much. I just bought an ASUS ROG AXE11000. I hope it works great. I'm using an ISP router at the moment. Yeah, well, when you get it hooked up, let us know what you think of it. Colin Longstaff contributes £10. Cheers, Colin. Thank you for supporting the channel and appreciate your Super Chat contribution. William Lynn said he had issues with his NETGEAR and it would not connect and it had issues. That can be true of any product. Again, it's not as though NETGEAR made a router that everybody had that problem, but certainly some people might have a problem with any product from any manufacturer. Usually what happens is they all pass quality control when they leave the factory. Typically they're handled all the same to the distributor, but what can happen is it could be mishandled when you order it from the retailer. So the retailer's sending it via, FedEx, UPS, or Amazon's own delivery service, for example. And some of those employees, if you see the way that some of them handle packages, you'd be surprised you don't get more broken product. It's typically that last mile of getting the product to the consumer where the potential for damage is greatest. Then the consumer gets it, and the consumer, because it's all solid state, you don't see anything physically broken, and the consumer thinks the manufacturer sold them a bad product, when in fact, in many cases, it was the delivery person, that last delivery person, that delivered it, or somewhere in that delivery chain that brought it to you from wherever you ordered it from. In my experience, that is when, if there's going to be damage, that's where it's most likely going to occur. Of course, things can happen, but usually when those things happen, it is typically something due to handling it, the way the environment you've got it in. If you've got it in a real humid environment, or if you've got it in a real dusty environment, or like I mentioned with all the ants, or you've had a power surge or something that affected it. Maybe you weren't even home when it happened, and then people will wrongly accuse the manufacturer of making a bad product. Not that you have, but that might be the reason why they never buy a product from that manufacturer again, when the manufacturer did nothing wrong. So just be aware of that when you're reading individual reviews, that it may be just unique to that person, and they don't have enough data to really say if that was a problem that was common. So unless you're seeing a bunch of reviewers all saying the same thing, and then the other thing is consider how many units were sold. So if I see 5,000 or 15,000 reviews on a product on Amazon, and 1,000 of those are negative, it doesn't bother me. If the vast majority of the reviews are positive reviews, I'm going for the majority, the consensus. But again, consumers, they like to see what they want to see. So if you've already got a bias against a company, they're going to lean towards the minority reviews that align with their feelings. So just be aware that people exhibit this psychological behavior. And if you're one of those people, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Buy whatever you want to buy for whatever reason. And just understand when you're reading other people's reviews, there might be feelings involved in it that are not logical and aren't factual from claims that end users make based on nothing more than a single one-time experience. Dustin Fuller joins us in the chat. Welcome in, Dustin. Greg, so here's exactly my example, and I thought Greg was probably doing this. Greg says, I found posts in NETGEAR's own forum about the router with the ports having on it. So again, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, of course, somebody who's had an issue, who is technically capable, a pissed off consumer will tell everybody that will listen. A happy one, maybe they'll give it, they'll say something nice. Most of the time they don't say anything at all. So when you go specifically looking for a specific problem that you're experiencing, it doesn't legitimize it because the people are complaining on Reddit versus NETGEAR's forum. They're the same people. So unless NETGEAR has an official knowledge base article that identifies this was an issue, then it was never an issue. You're turning it into one. You are exhibiting a very common end consumer psychology. And I don't want other people to be swayed by the inaccuracy of that lack of data that these end users are getting to false conclusions without any sense of scale. So I advise all of you to think independently. Always listen to reviews with a grain of salt, especially when it comes to routers, how things are handled, how they're used. Yes, whatever problem you're having with any piece of equipment, you can go online and find somebody else having that problem. But if it's a real issue, then the company acknowledges that. In many cases, they extend warranties. Sometimes companies don't want to acknowledge it, but they get sued because there's enough evidence that the company has no choice. When neither a lawsuit happens nor the company issues an acknowledgement of the problem, then it was never a problem except for a very tiny percentage of buyers. I can guarantee that any company that produces product that breaks within warranty is going to go out of business if the vast majority of their products are as bad as the end consumers make it out to be. Or they would go out of business because nobody would buy their product anymore. The very fact that the company exists and continues to be a leader in that particular category, it should be all the evidence you need that for one reason or another, you got a bad unit. And in most cases, it's because of the shipping that takes place. In other cases, it's power issues that you may or may not be aware of, or it could be the end user using it in a way that it wasn't intended. Or it could just be that a part went bad. That does happen, but it's very rare. Working at my scale, seeing the number of units that I see, I can't recall there was an issue with any router that universally affected my customers, ever. So you're going to feel how you feel. I'm not here to deny your feelings. I'm here to argue the facts. I try to keep my feelings out of it. But I understand your feelings. I get it. I just don't want people confusing feelings with facts. At least not when it comes to this tech stuff. It's just, feelings are random, chaotic, and in many cases illogical. Facts, on the other hand, are inarguable. It doesn't matter if you agree with them, it doesn't change them. They are the same universally for everybody. If people choose to deny them, that's their choice, but it doesn't actually change the facts. Does anybody else have any questions related to routers, or you want to spout your feelings because you had one negative experience with some massive manufacturer that leads the industry? Go ahead and let us know in the chat room. it's fascinating to me as a technician how end users will come to conclusions that have absolutely nothing to do with what actually happened. But maybe everything you're saying is true, and this was a problem that wasn't acknowledged, and somehow they got away with it. They couldn't continue to get away with that and stay in business. So understand my skepticism. But if you never want to buy that company's product again, doesn't matter to me. I don't care. Rock Legends wants to know if there's a non-router for Wi-Fi. Always has been. They're called access points. Will ASUS be more reliable than NETGEAR? In all likelihood, the reliability is going to be exactly the same. Again, there are certain things that are beyond your control with regards to, in particular, power issues. And the warranties, I believe, are the same between the two products. And regardless of what anybody says about reliability, will not reassure or change the actual events in reality that happen if you choose to buy one. So it doesn't matter what the reliability ratings are. For example, if airline travel, they say, is the safest way to travel, that fewer people are killed in airline travel than in vehicles and in walking on the sidewalk, that does not mean that you are exempt from being hurt or killed traveling via the safest mode of travel. You're playing statistics. At the end of the day, you need to look at your warranty. You need to know that your product is guaranteed to work during that warranty period. If you pay with a credit card, many credit card companies double your warranty of electronic devices. You might want to look into that. And if you have so much anxiety about it, you can often opt to buy the extended warranty, if that'll make you feel better. The last bad router that I have seen was that ASUS N900 router where the button wouldn't stay in anymore. Mitch Morrison, his router was acting flaky. I've seen some routers act flaky, but not just necessarily flat out die. And it was old though, it was really, really old, and it was due to be replaced anyway. And when it got replaced, he didn't need his Wi-Fi extender anymore, his transfer speeds are up, his reliability went up. So in most cases, if they die out of warranty, it's probably due to time to replace them. And if you're somebody that, you spend a lot of money on one of these, $500 or 400, whatever, consider buying the extended warranty for peace of mind if you're that nervous about it. And that way you're guaranteed that that router is going to be functional for you for the length of whatever the warranty is, or extended warranty in this case. Amazon sells extended warranties. Newegg pushes them all the time. And again, if you're paying with a credit card, look into, as I mentioned, many credit cards double your warranty on electronic devices. But you would do your warranty claim through the credit card company in that instance. TWC Coster said his old Wi-Fi router stopped working, so I had to get a new one. Sure. He says, it's working better. Well, now it's worse, he says, than before. I'm going to look into getting a new router. Yeah, well, and you don't say how old is, right? Somebody might say their old router and they're referring to what they bought 6 months ago. Somebody else is referring to one from, 2005. So, but yes, none of this stuff lasts forever. And usually things work better when you upgrade it. So if it's provided from your ISP, then that should be an issue you take up with your ISP, since that's what you're paying for is service, and they should send somebody out to fix it or replace it. If you replace it yourself, then the onus is on you with regards to taking care of things that aren't set up properly, configured properly, or fail. So the pros and cons of having it from the ISP, and any issues become the ISP's issues. You call them and you say, take care of it. If you want to replace it yourself, you can't do that. You can't say, take care of it. Now it's on you to take care of it. You're not guaranteed you're not going to just replace it with another router you have problems with. Depends on what the problems are. They could be related to your environment, or it could be related to the piece of equipment you're connecting to it, or pieces of equipment you're connecting to it. And you're falsely claiming it's the router when in fact it's actually something else. All of these are fair possibilities. Terrell says, I have a NETGEAR, I'm going to assume it's a router, and when a device connects to the 2.4 gig, it can't see anything but internet. And if I connect it to 5G, it sees everything. On your router, you want to make sure you don't have network isolation. There's a little box in the, when you log into the router, look for network isolation. If that's turned on, especially on your 2.4 gig network, or if you're connecting to your guest network, then the router is working as instructed. Also, another thing you might consider is change the channel on your 2.4 gig network, even though you wouldn't think that's related. You have channels 1 through 11, and pretty much there's only 3 channels to truly pick from. 1 and 11 because they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, and then 5 or 6 right there in the middle. 2, 3, and 4, and 7, 8, 9, 10, they're so close together they might as well not even be there. So 1, 6, or 11, let's just say. So whatever you're on now, if you just left it as the default, I would go in and change it to one end, change it to channel 1 or change it to channel 11, save that setting, let the router restart, see if that helps. Make sure you're not connecting to your guest network, and make sure that network isolation box is not checked. Usually these are not router problems, but physical router problems. They're usually end user configuration, self-inflicted in most cases. In most cases. Depending on how old your NETGEAR router is. You didn't tell me what model it is, and you didn't tell me how old it is, and you didn't tell me when the problem started or if it ever worked. And that's all critical information to help get you to a solution. But my initial instinctive reaction based on over 30 years in this industry and hearing from having to translate what end consumers say into what's really happening, it's likely a configuration issue. The ISPs giving out returned equipment, that's standard in the industry. All ISPs do that as far as I know. Terrell says he checked that network isolation is turned off. You know what I would do is I would use the reset button in the back of that router, and or you can go into the menu and usually under administration or under backup, there's an option to reset the router to factory defaults. I would take it back to factory defaults, and then I would only set up the obviously you got to set up an admin name and password, and you could just put it back the way you had it. And then I would set up the network name and password to your 2.4 and 5 gig channels. And I wouldn't make any other changes to that router. Even if there are other changes you want to, just don't do it yet. And see if that solves your problem. Because if it solves your problem, that tells you it was something you changed in the router, or somehow something got corrupt in the router and you didn't have anything to do with you. So reset it back to factory defaults. Put your network SSID and password back the way they were so you don't have to reprogram your devices. And yeah, let's see if your shares work then. Terrell says when he scans on a phone app for Wi-Fi, he is the only wireless access it finds. But that doesn't mean you might be getting interference, especially on 2.4. 2.4 is so easily interrupted by microwave ovens and hair dryers and all kinds of stuff. One of the biggest mistakes that I see usually they're techs that are just beginning. One of the most common mistakes they make is they use their own logic to not make a change to try to figure out what doesn't make sense. They're trying to use logic to figure out something that doesn't make any sense to them. When in fact, you cannot, as a good computer technician, you cannot say, I'm not going to try to change the channel because I'm the only channel. That will very rarely work in your benefit. until you actually change the channel and try it. You know, imagine the shock on the tech's face when I tell them, you can't say, I didn't do that because I don't need to. You don't know what you need to do because you don't know what the problem, you can't solve this problem. The problem doesn't make any sense. Therefore, in most cases, the solution won't make any sense to you. And when the solution that works doesn't make any sense to you, then you can study it and say, why did this change have this effect? And then you can learn why, and then it will be logical. But you can't apply the logic before you have the solution on a problem that doesn't make any sense. You have to try literally every possibility and see what the end results are. And so even if you're right in your assumptions, you just don't know for a fact until you try it. And then you can say, okay, I know for a fact it's not that because I tried all three channels. I tried channel 1, channel 6, and channel 11. Didn't make any difference. It's not that. I've tried resetting the router. It's not that. You could get a spare router, just something you might have laying around, plug it in, even if it's slower, just to see. Because it could be your device. You could be just so fixated on the router that you're failing to see it's the device you're connecting to it that's causing this problem. And the only way to truly know that is to just grab another router. You know, you can buy a $20 router off Amazon. Try it out. Keep it as a spare for future use or send it back when you're done with it. As long as you're an Amazon Prime customer, returns are free and easy. It doesn't matter why you're sending it back. But yeah, you have to remove the logic when you're failing to make sense of the problem. In all likelihood, the solution won't make any sense to you. So just bear that in mind for any problems in life that don't make any sense. You've got to open your mind up to things that don't make sense as possible solutions. And when one of those things works, then you can work your way backwards to figure out why. But trying to do that before you have the solution, you're just spinning in circles. And let us know how it goes. Try those things out that I've suggested, and if you still continue to have problems or you've resolved it, be very curious to hear a follow-up on that. Terrell? Patrick said, Spectrum, even when you rent their equipment, they charge you for a service call. It's my understanding, Patrick, that they only charge you for the service call if the problem was yours and not theirs. So in other words, they'll say, okay, we'll come out and look at the problem, but if we find out the problem was because of you, we're charging you for the call. So in other words, they come out to your place and they see that the cable's not plugged in, or one of your pets has chewed through the cable, or you've run the cable over with a chair with wheels and you didn't realize you did it, or there's something that you are responsible for. They're not working for you for free. If in fact the problem has to do with their equipment or a failure on their side, then you don't get billed for it. But yes, if they come out because of something that's a fault of yours, by all means they should charge you for it. How else would they stay in business? How would you run your business like that? Anybody could just call you after they've created a problem? I've had users, I'll give you an example. Customer calls me, says, my Wi-Fi is not working. I go, well, did you change anything? They go, no. I go, when did the problem start? I mean, we're talking for a while. Problem started 3 days ago. 3 days ago. Interesting. And it was working fine up until 3 days ago. Yeah. And you didn't change anything? No, nothing's changed. I go, okay, well, I want you to check the connection on the back of your modem. I want to make sure that it's plugged in all the way. Well, I just checked it. I go, but yeah, humor me. Check it with me as well. It's hard to get to since we moved everything. Like, what do you mean you moved everything? Well, yeah, about 3 days ago, we moved, my wife redecorated and we put the TV on the other wall and the couch on the opposite wall. I go, well, when you did that, did you move the router? Yeah. Well, that's your problem. You've probably run it too far and the signal's too weak now. When I asked you, I said, do you remember when I asked you, did you change anything? And you remember when you said no just a minute ago? Oh, I didn't think about that. You're absolutely right. I go, well, we could have got here this much quicker than me interrogating, trying to get the answer out of you that I asked you. So now I'm upset. Their upset too. They're as upset with themselves because they should have known better, number one. Number two, when they were asked, they didn't think about the answer. They just automatically said no. And they're embarrassed. And it's so frustrating to have to interrogate consumers to get answers out of them when you point blank ask and they tell you no. And then you start delving in deeper and the answer flips to yes. That happens so many times. It's enough, after decades of it, I can assure you, it's enough to make somebody want to switch careers. Gordon Ma-Ung, who is a writer for PC World magazine, recently wrote an article about, he had a couple of friends reach out to him because their computers were like having 100% CPU usage, or the hard drive activity wouldn't stop. And they go to him because he's like the expert. Hey, can you help me, my buddy, my friend? My computer just started, I'm getting 100% CPU. And so Gordon is assuming this is a clean install of Windows, right? They're like, yeah, I just upgraded to the new AMD processor, and ever since then, my hard drive activity is at 100%, or my CPU use is 100%. And so Gordon is assuming when they built their new system, they did a fresh install of Windows, because they're tech-savvy people. These people that are calling asking for help are tech-savvy. Are. Not aren't. They are. So they're stuck, and they're coming to Gordon. Gordon would think, well, surely they did a fresh install, right? Well, Gordon says, did you try this? Did you try that? You're like, yeah, I did this. Yeah, I did that. And he just kind of runs out of ideas, and he said, you did do a fresh install. No. No? No, I just carried my operating system over. Well, it would have helped if you'd told me that an hour ago. You're going to need to do a fresh install. I'm not going to dig through your registry and your drivers for the next 2 days trying to figure out where the problem is. A lot of times, people are just lazy and they don't want to be bothered with it. And they move the drive over, the system boots. They're like, hey, aren't I smart? They pat themselves on the back for how smart they are. And then they have a problem and they can't figure it out. And it never occurs to them it's because they carried over some old drivers from the old system. They were just being lazy. So now the work they didn't want to do, they're asking their friend to do for free when they should have done it themselves. And the reason Gordon wrote the article was another friend did the exact same thing, like within a matter of days. Two completely different people called for the exact same reason and for the exact same process. Gordon's try this, try that. And then Gordon says, wait a minute. This is after you did an upgrade? Yeah? Yeah. And you did a fresh install of Windows when you did your upgrade? No. And he wanted to just throw the phone out into the street. He was so ticked off. These are people that should have known better. And these are people who are effectively asking him to volunteer his time to do something they were too lazy to do for themselves that only benefits them. So it's profoundly disrespectful. Now, when it's a customer paying you, different story entirely. But yeah, and especially when it's coming from tech-savvy friends who should know better. So you can find that article right now at pcworld.com. It's still on there. It's either on the first page or second page. And I'm reading it and I'm going, yep, been there. Been there many times. I should have a punch card. So a lot of times when you initiate those tech support calls, you've got to ask the basic questions, even to your tech-savvy friends. I'm just scrolling through the chat here to see if for any other questions that I've missed here. Captain Blinsky says a router's beacon interval is fun to learn and configure. Yeah, you can also probably change the default long preamble to a short preamble, since the long preamble is like for really old networking stuff that most people probably don't have, and it can speed up your transmission a bit just by switching if you have that in your advanced settings of your router. But I don't advise you to make these changes without taking on the risk that you could cause a problem that you don't notice for a while. But if it's something you want to play with to learn, learning about long preamble versus short preamble. Not all routers offer you to make that change, but the routers I buy, they all do that. And it's always in the advanced section. Kyle says, how many computers are you building for Christmas for vets? I don't build computers for vets, very rarely. Typically, we have off-lease computers that are already built, or they're machines I have returned from a client that wants them upgraded, and it doesn't follow holidays. If anything, Veterans Day, but yeah, there's nothing specific for Christmas. I don't want to ship anything. Well, let me rephrase. I want to ship as little as possible from Black Friday through the end of the first week of January, because the shippers hire a lot of temporary help. They're overwhelmed with packages. Those packages take longer to get delivered, and the likelihood for damage is far greater. So we don't do giveaways during the holidays typically for anyone under most circumstances. TWC Custer says, if I return my equipment to the ISP, do they shut off my internet? You're going to need to talk to them. I would not take any advice from any random person on the internet in this regard. If it's important to you, you need to call your ISP. That's the company you're paying. Talk to their support, explain what the problem is. And rather than coming up with your own solution, I would advise you to ask them for advice. So for example, you call the ISP, you say, I'm having a problem with this new router you guys delivered, and it seems that you want to charge me to come out and look at it, even though I'm very convinced it's your issue. It's something you guys caused. It's either the equipment or the way it was set up. What would you advise me to do? That is my recommendation for all of you before you start slamming a hammer down on stuff and making up your mind. Contact the company you're paying, explain the situation, and ask them how you should proceed. And if they beat around the bush without a direct answer, say, what would you do if you were me? What are my options? Can I get my own router? Can I get my own modem? How does that work? And don't listen to what anybody on the internet tells you. Talk to the people that are taking your money and listen to them. That's the best advice I can give you. Different ISPs have different rules, and what applies to one area may not apply to you, and vice versa. Bob Wilson says, and Gordon doesn't have friends anymore. Hey, Bob, with friends like that, who needs enemies? Those don't sound like good friends. You know, you can have friends and you can have good friends. If I lose a few friends and all they're doing is causing me pain, good riddance. There's an old expression, if you loan a friend 20 bucks and you never see that friend again, you got away cheap. People that are selfish and disrespectful don't sound like friends. Jason said he's had a lot of people that forget to take the tape off of the toner cartridges and then call for support because they're having a printer problem. Yeah. What are you going to do? All right, so where are we at with today's broadcast? We've been live now for about an hour and 45. So I'll probably wrap this up at the 2-hour mark. We've got about 15 minutes left. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I could advise you about on these routers. I think I'm going to put this one back, and I think the new one and this one, I think will go back to Amazon, and I'll just wait until Wi-Fi 7. I think that's what I'm going to do. But I don't want to act too hastily. I might just wait till around the end of the month, just so I have a little bit more time to play around with them, just to ensure that it's whether or not I'm not adapting to them. I don't necessarily think I should have to, that I might be missing something. So I want to make sure I don't act too hastily. I do have plenty of time to return these, and I will get every penny back. It won't cost me anything. I just literally will put them back in their boxes, take them over to the UPS. Well, I get a return code from Amazon. Take it over to the UPS store, and UPS will box these and return them. I just have to make sure everything that I got, if I got the instruction manual, I have to put that back. Obviously the power adapter. They also come with short network cables, patch cables. I've left those in the boxes because I don't use them. And I want to make sure I reset them. If I've done any configuration to them, I'll set them back to factory defaults, put them back in the box, get my return code, take it to the UPS store. They'll scan the QR code on my phone, and within sometimes minutes, sometimes a couple of days, Amazon will credit that back onto my Amazon account, and then I can use that money to purchase literally anything else. It doesn't have to be another router. Can you show us your current router's features? Yeah, well, just simply go to the Amazon page in the link below the video, and the manufacturer has all the features there. And you can also, if you're interested seeing it hands-on in video, there are YouTube videos where the content creators walk through the firmware of each of these routers with various levels of depth and explanation. And you can always download the PDF file for free from the manufacturer. You can go to NETGEAR and look up the PDF manual for this router. You go to ASUS and pull up the PDF manual on that one, and you can go through, and these manuals are, I believe, over 100 pages long. So going over the features isn't something we just skim over very quickly, and not the intent of the video. But you can certainly dive in as deep as you want with the resources online, as well as other video reviews that might be at the granular level that you're looking for. Ron wants to know if I'm broadcasting on Friday as I normally do. I think so. I don't know that I don't have anything in my mind that I'm set to do. If anything, I just like to maintain the schedule, and I may not come up with a subject until minutes before showtime. But I am intending, as of today, I am intending to broadcast as normal every Friday, which is at 1:00 p.m. Mountain Time. Currently, that's 12 p.m. Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So all these different time zones get a little confusing, but it's always the same every Friday. So unless I get food poisoning on Thursday, I kid. I'm sure everything will be fine. But I'm just saying, unless something unexpected occurs, yes, I am planning on broadcasting on Friday. I just don't know what the subject will be yet. I will also have, I'm going to try and get Begowden from Acronis here for an interview next week. He's been sick, so if he's not feeling well, then obviously we're going to wait till he's feeling better. Hopefully he'll be feeling better some point next week, and we can bring him on and talk about the latest version of Acronis and offer you guys a limited time discount. And then I've got to bring on Simon from RoboForm, and we'll see what his availability is next week as well. And if he's available, I'll do that next week, and we'll talk about the latest version of RoboForm, the latest enhancements, as well as the discount, which is active right now. The 60% off is only for new RoboForm customers only. There's no discount for renewals or license extensions. this year. Not my decision, that's what they want to do. So if you are a new RoboForm customer, you can save 60% off during this promotional campaign that will last until the end of this year. The link you'll find in the video notes below this video. TWC Codster, I said, I have the 2021 version of Acronis. Do you recommend upgrading to the latest Acronis, or does it really matter what version I have? Well, there's more to versions than just changing the number. So whether or not there are features or enhancements or compatibilities in the new version of Acronis that appeal to you, you'll have to watch the interview and listen to Begowden explain what the differences are. And of course, you're welcome to ask that same question during the live interview and see what Begowden has to say. But a lot of it depends on how you use it, what you use it with, and what your expectations are. For me as a computer technician, I always want the latest version of Acronis at all time to ensure compatibility with the latest hardware. You know, it wouldn't do me much good to be running Acronis 2009 or Acronis TrueImage Echo and I've got an NVMe drive. It's never going to see it. And things like UEFI and stuff like that. So it really depends. Are you one of these folks that, you know, always buys the latest and greatest, or is there a feature or an enhancement to the latest version that you would find valuable, right? And that's not something I can answer for you, but hopefully you'll be able to answer the question on your own, I think, by listening to the interview, which I hope you'll join us for, as Begowden goes over what the differences are and why that might matter to some people. ITT says, thank you for all the interviews. Well, thanks for tuning in and thanks for watching. Captain Blinsky said, I had a friend who didn't get on the web and turned out their router was unplugged. Yeah, well, you're lucky when the problem's that easy, you know. Just looking back through the chat to see if I missed any other questions. If you did ask a question and I haven't addressed it, likely I didn't see it, so feel free to put your question in there again. I do, if things stay quiet, plan on wrapping this up here in just a few minutes. Tom Parada contributes $9.99. He says, hey, Carey and chat. I had some bad news today, and I'm happy to have this channel on as a stress relief and chill method. A blessed Thanksgiving to you all. Hey, Dom, you all have challenging days. If I can be a distraction to you, I'm glad to offer that service. Thanks for hanging out with us. And if we can get your mind off of things, if none of the information is useful other than to distract you, I'm good with it. So I hope you're going to feel better sooner rather than later. Sometimes Thanksgiving can be a challenging time with some families. There can be some internal infighting and some raw nerves that certain family members have a skill on knowing how to push buttons nobody else can push to other family members. But, you know, hopefully you have an enjoyable time and nobody's pushing anybody's buttons, and any challenges that come your way, you know, it's hopefully something you can learn to roll with in whatever way you need to. Sarge Tech says, I love that this chat is a force for good and always willing to help each other out. Absolutely. And that's why I say when it comes to people discussing particular issues they're having or, with their technology or having trouble understanding things, it's not just me answering questions. We have the community in the chat also offering their solutions and their explanations, which may connect more effectively than mine. So I love that. I love how involved the community is, that it's not just all put onto my shoulders. And I also like that the people asking the questions can get different perspectives, because working in the industry, I'm always going to give you the same answer I'm going to give my customers. Whereas the type of advice I find online is stuff that would end up with me having to find a new career if I actually did that in business. So people that aren't in business may offer advice I would not offer, but it may be all the person that's asking needs. And since I'm not taking on any liability, and I'm not jeopardizing my integrity by having two separate sets of rules. Like, well, here's what I'll tell you to do as a friend, but here's what I'll tell you to do as a business. Me running a business and having to protect myself. I always answer all the questions and offer all the solutions I offer to my paying customers. I don't have a separate set of rules here. And for that reason, everything I do is done with a certain caution. So for example, like I tell you, don't run these PC utilities. There's people that will say, I've been running, I've never had a problem. That's great for you. That's wonderful for you. But if you're running a business and you run these PC utilities on client software and you don't have a license to do that, one, if the utility company finds out about it, that you're profiting from using their software, well, just look up what happened to Geek Squad when they were doing that years ago. They don't do that anymore. And two, if a problem develops later after you run the utility, which may be an indirect consequence, and whether or not the utility actually did it or not, your customer is absolutely convinced that they never had the problem until you touched the computer. You will be liable for repairing that at your expense, at whatever it takes, or potentially you'll receive the wrath of a pissed off customer, which could be negative Google and Yelp reviews. Most of the time customers, they'll say they'll see you. Most of the time they don't. They're all talk in most cases. So I'm not really worried about that. Unless it's a business that's pissed off who says they're going to see you, probably will. But home users, yeah, they're going to just try and demolish your reputation on social media. So it's not worth it to just say, well, I've never had a problem, so you should absolutely recommend that everybody does that. Not when you're holding liability, you don't. So the chat room has that freedom to offer solutions that I don't, or I refuse to, because of the potential negative consequences. So that's what I really like, is that people can get both sides and they can choose which way is right for them. Because at the end of the day, what they choose to do is on them. One way or another, I don't hold liability to it. It's just my own internal rule that I'm not going to answer it one way online and answer it a different way for a customer. I keep it all the same. Luke Greenia says, to clear up any confusion, I have the NETGEAR Nighthawk AXE500 Wi-Fi router, which he says is the RAXE500. And he says so far seems to be a great router. Yeah, I couldn't find the RAXE75, but I've liked all the NETGEAR Nighthawk routers. And they all pretty much look alike. I mean, these Nighthawks, they've been pretty much sticking with this particular shell for a few years now. And it's an unusual antenna layout, but they all seem to work really good. And I've got to say, even the ASUS routers I've been running have all been good as well. I'm just disappointed with the lack of expandability, wired expandability, no USB, only 4 Ethernet ports. And again, at this price point, it just feels like I'm paying too much. I feel like I'm paying about $150 too much. So I don't see any other questions. Oh, TWC Kotster wants to know if SanDisk sells anything less than 128 gig of the Extreme Pros anymore. I want one or two to have a quick Windows 10 or 11 install on. Will be the only thing on the drive and would be a waste. Well, I'll tell you what, before we wrap it up, let's just take a look at that. So you're talking about the 64 gig. That'll be the smallest, at least that was the smallest, was 64 gig. If we go over to Amazon, let's take a quick look. Let me share my screen again. And let's type in, we'll do this two ways. We'll type in SanDisk Extreme Pro 64 gig USB. That's 128, 128. There's the 64 gig, which looks like it's not in stock. See the SanDisk store. USB. USB flash drives. So that's the 3.2. The lowest it goes is 128. And one other place you can look is we can go to Western Digital Store. Western Digital owns SanDisk, and you can buy directly from them. So we can go to Products, buy SanDisk, USB flash drives, and there's the Extreme Grow USB 3.1. It's 128. Wonder if we can search within that. Well, there's only 2 pages to look, I guess. 128 is where they start. There's another brand that I like you might want to consider, though. I think you just waited too long because they were selling the 64s for a long time. You can get 64s in the other formats, but if you want it in the Pro format, it looks like 128 is where they're starting. But let me show you this other brand that I was impressed with. They're called T-Cell. Well, that looks like it's starting at 128 too. This case is all metal. It's got a little Swarovski crystal in it for some reason. It has an LED that lights up so you can see the read and write activity, but it's still a removable cap. It's not the slide out design. Team makes a very similar looking flash drive. If I can find it. These right here are like the little miniature SanDisk drives that also slide out. They don't have any read or write LED, and they're not quite as fast, but they're super cheap. You can still get those in 64 gigs. But the one I was looking for is Team. Is it Team? I think it's Team. Scroll through here real quick. There's a bunch of 64 gig drives. This is from SanDisk. I gotta look in the drawer. I've got one in the drawer. Maybe I'm remembering the name wrong. Who makes this? Oh, Silicon Power makes them. Let's see if we can find it under Silicon Power. The Look how tiny these little 64 gig flash drives are. Isn't that crazy? There's an old school with the light in the cap. And I know they have the slide out. They're not as fast. I mean, nothing in the 64 gig size is as fast as those SanDisk Pro Extremes. The other thing you could do, if you wanted to take a chance, SanDisk Pro Extreme 64 gig USB. Hit the shopping tab. Somebody might have some old inventory laying around. What size is that? Some third-party seller is offering these on Walmart.com. This is not from Walmart directly. And yes, you can still buy one. They're expensive because supply and demand. It would be cheaper for you to buy a larger capacity one probably, but you could probably also check eBay as well. I'm just looking at the pictures, see if there's any up there. Yeah, I'm guessing they're just not making it, and they haven't made it in a while. So anybody who's still got some have old inventory, that may result in having no warranty on it. I've only had one SanDisk flash drive ever die on me. And SanDisk replaced it super easy. I just had to pay for the shipping back to them. Yeah, I'm not having any luck here. Interesting. All right, guys, I guess that's going to wrap it up for us. I appreciate everybody hanging out in the chat today and participating in this live broadcast. Thank you so much. Thank you for the super chat contributions, and thank you for your participation. I will see you all on Friday. I hope all of us here in America that are watching will have a happy and safe Thanksgiving holiday. Obviously, I will not be broadcasting tomorrow on the holiday. I will be away. But we'll look forward to seeing you all again on Friday, 1 o'clock Arizona time. That's Mountain Time. Once again, 1 o'clock Mountain Time is 12 p.m. Pacific Time, which is also 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It's always the same. And, well, Mountain Time is always the same. And the 3-hour difference between East and West Coast is always the same. But Daylight Saving Time always kind of screws around with our you know, it goes from 4 o'clock Eastern to 3 o'clock Eastern, or 1 o'clock Pacific to noon, but it's always, always, always 1 o'clock Mountain Time, because Mountain Time, we don't adjust our clocks ever. So I hope I'll see you then. Until then, bye for now.